Hi, and welcome to She's the Boss, the show that is all about female founders and women doing extraordinary things in business. Now, if you enjoy the show, which I hope you will, please like, comment, or share. And subscribe to the channel. But in the meantime, let me talk about my amazing guest. I'm really excited to be talking with her. Her name is Susan Morrice. Now, Susan is the co-founder and chair of the Belize Natural Energy Company. And if you want to hear her entrepreneurial story, you must go and listen to the episode in the podcasts. But today I really want to know about Educo. She talks about it a lot. I know that it's transformed her life. And I know that one of the other She's the Boss members, Stephanie Woolard, who is doing incredible things in Nepal, has also done the course because she introduced me to it. So welcome, Susan. It's fantastic to have you here.
Wonderful to be here, Jules. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. So how about we start with what is it that you're actually doing now, and what's the name of your business or your businesses, and why are you doing them? There's a nice big question for you.
Well, now being in this century, I'm actually originally Irish, and I'm living
You'd never guess, Susan. You just wouldn't know at all.
Well, I wore the green sweater just in case, we forgot. But I have found myself between Denver and Belize. And who would have thought a wee girl growing up in the troubles of Belfast? I mean, Belfast, when I was growing up, was war-torn with, I'm afraid, bigotry, prejudice, etc. And it was the last thing that somebody would have thought, because I went to an all-girls school even. I mean, the background didn't necessarily lend itself. However, it just showed that anybody can dare to dream big and follow their dreams.
Well, absolutely. And I know you became a geologist. So if you went to an all-girls school and you grew up in war-torn Belfast, what made you even think about geology? It's just such an extraordinary thing, particularly back in those times.
Yeah. Well, I think probably I've got to thank, of course, my parents, but also a geography teacher who I'm afraid has just recently passed. But she used to take us on field trips. And they'd be to, the rocks, the countryside and things like that. And I then got to understand that you could climb across the rocks and be outside and be having fun. And it was even called a real job. And I thought, I think this is a good one.
I love the way you think. I actually have a son who's obsessed with sitting on the ground and checking out the rocks and things as well. So yeah. I can just picture you as a little girl doing that.
Yeah, no, it was great. And mum and dad and granny and my brothers and sisters, we all used to go for picnics. And, around the edge of Ireland on beaches, on rocks and things like that. So it was sort of easy to grow up in the throes of nature. And geology, I actually didn't even really know the word because it was called physical geography in my school.
And, physical geography. That's a good name for it.
And not physical, boop, 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 but rocks. And,
right.
Anyway, I hardly, in fact, did any sciences. So that was another apparent drawback. So I would say to all the STEM people involved, do not give up, because the mind is amazing. And I know we're going to talk about that. But I did not have a background that would have ticked any boxes to do what I have done. But I would.
I was going to say, so how did it start then? I mean, how did you even think about geology? And then how did you even find Belize? And we'll also have to explain for anyone here that doesn't know where Belize is, because it's not a big, well-known country.
It's not?
Well, it isn't for a lot of Australians, I would guess.
The very thing, I'm going to start at the end there, the thing that unites Australia and Belize is the barrier reef. They are the two number one locations. Southern Hemisphere, Australia, Northern Hemisphere, Belize, have the largest, most beautiful, pristine barrier reefs in the world. And
my goodness, I never knew that. I never realized that there was even another barrier reef. So that's there you go. I've learned something.
Yes. And for instance, there would be a scuba diver's haven, but it was called British Honduras. So there's another commonality. We are part of what was the outreach in the Commonwealth today. I think there's 51 countries, including Australia, Canada, etc. And Belize is one of them, known as British Honduras, still has the ties, the trade ties, a bit like Australia, and the network around the world. So those two links are actually pretty interesting historically. Pretty good.
Well, they are. That kind of makes me want to go to Belize now, and it hadn't been on my radar before. So there you go. You've already done that. So, so tell me, how did it all evolve, especially for a girl who wasn't doing sciences? I mean, that's extraordinary in itself.
Yeah. In fact, I'm about to tell you another truth here. I went to Trinity, which is it's a wonderful university in Dublin.
It is. My dad went there, and my grandfather as well, and my mum.
Really? Well, then you're going to be shocked to hear what happened. I went down, not having done any science, but fascinated by this apparent science, geology. But I didn't have chemistry or biology or physics. And so in I plunged with all the engineers and everything, and I would write stories about the experiments, because I didn't have a background in science. But actually, looking back on it, I think it was, if I could even say it was maybe even a positive, because it allowed me to nurture and bring forward the imagination that we're all born with, but quite often gets sort of squashed in conventional education. And I had to use it because it was almost all I had. If you think geology is a bit like joining the dots, except it's in 3 dimensions. You get a number of pieces of what we call outcrop rocks, and then we use our imagination and some tools like seismic or various forms of geophysics and join the dots under the earth to portray the architecture. But nobody really knows. So imagination and bringing that innate
and gut instinct, I guess, would be another thing then in that sort of an environment.
Tied together, very much so. Yep. So,
and also, obviously, and as the years have progressed, I'm sure you start to build the skills to know that those 3 outcrops mean that there might be something in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, and something in the middle could be a gold deposit, if that's what you're thinking about. And of course, what I was looking for in Belize was oil and gas. And, just to jump to something exciting, we had 500,000 acres. And we had to choose the location of one well, which is worse than finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, everybody.
And let me jump in as well, because you also, lots of companies had tried to find oil there, hadn't they? Yep. I think when we were interviewing me before, you said there were 50 dry wells that had been put down by all the big companies before you got there and chose your 500 square miles or whatever it was.
Yes, the 50 dry holes had been drilled by most of the big boys, the big oil companies, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, etc. Shell had been in, all the big ones had been in and declared the area basically a no-go area, no oil.
I just love this so much. I love it that you didn't listen to them in the first place and that you kind of showed them in the second place.
Well, I must say the retired president of Shell Pecton, Marlon Downey, even though he told me, to be careful of my reputation, keeping going on about Belize, he was one of the first to congratulate me and say, Susan, your perseverance, your vision, because he realized there was something extra, and that extraness, that understanding of the mind that he alluded to actually there, was what all came together to allow us to transcend all the difficulties. And because we only had enough money for maybe a well and a half. And
I love this story. and so you got. Yeah.
Well, in essence, what really happened was, because normally in the oil business, when you're going to drill what's called a wildcat,
right,
maybe another oil company would come in with you. But we tried about 40 of them. None of them would come in. They basically all had heard the story. There's no oil. So
I bet they're kicking themselves now.
It's wonderful, because I must say they all have been man enough to congratulate us.
Oh, that's good. Well, I mean, and really, it's an amazing accomplishment. So they bloody well should have.
I think,
now,
I was going to say, I think what actually is in this day and age, and I mean, especially in the reflection that's occurring in many people's minds during this shut-in time, what we've become famous for is, yes, discovery of the first oil against all odds, but because of the holistic model, the model which is the empowerment of the people of Belize and the balance and harmony with the environment, we have become a beacon for that around the world. And I think that is something that I'm probably even more proud of.
Okay, now, Susan, I think that when I was reading your bio, you did the Educo course before you found the oil. Is that right?
Very definitely. In fact, let me just take a few steps back to answer your question accurately. Mike Usher and I, now Mike is a very tall Belizean man, and I met him about 35 years ago. But I had already fallen in love with Belize and Belizean people. I was introduced to him in Denver because people already heard me saying about this amazing country with the beautiful people. And into my life walked Mike Usher, who had the same desire. And we became sort of soulmates. He had the same desire to make a difference. And both of us were in different ends of the oil business. And we thought...
Right, so hang on. Well, what did Mike do then? If you were the geologist, what was his role?
Well, he was a surveyor with CGG, which is a big geophysical company.
Right.
And so it was more that we both were thinking if oil could be found and actually carried out with and for the people, it could make a real difference in the country, positively, instead of negatively, which is quite often what happens around the world. There's a sort of a negative aura around oil, but it's not the oil's fault. It's the handling of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the people that run it. So I'm fascinated to hear what you're actually doing in Belize to make a difference. But let you keep telling me that story first. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, because Mike and I searched for 15 years. We even caused a well to be drilled in offshore Belize. And actually, I even thank God right now we didn't hit, because it's so important to have partners with total alignment.
Absolutely. And that's the same for any woman out there. You know, if you're going to have a partner, they've got to be on the same journey as you.
Whether it be romantic or business or friendship, it's really important to be to back each other, to believe in each other, and to hang around with the right group. And I'd say that's a takeaway in itself. Now, I then, parallel to Mike and I shooting seismic drilling wells and with no avail, I had a sort of an invention. It was called the International Pavilion. And it made me actually quite well known in the oil and gas arena. Because
what was the International Pavilion then?
The International Pavilion was an idea which I had to invite the energy world, the oil and gas world, to come and exhibit all their petroleum potential at the AAPG convention. Now, every year, because at that stage, this was 25 years ago now, that wasn't happening. And yet it seemed so obvious. So,
well, I'm such a huge fan of collaboration, I have to say, with everyone. I very rarely see competitors. I see potential collaborators or people to support. But I would have thought in that industry, everyone is competing with each other. So how did you even do it, and what made you think of it?
Because I was traveling as a young geologist. I was traveling to various parts, whether it be Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, Belize, and I could see all this potential. I would come back to Denver, and the price of oil was so low, my geology pals were bartenders. There was no work. And I thought,
wow,
well, this is nutty. How do I get them all together? And as life would have it, and I think that's another key phrase, as life would have it, the American Association of Petroleum Geologists approached me. Actually, it was the head of the convention, Robbie Grease, and said, would you be the head of international in this next year's convention? And I said, well, what does it do? And they said, we've never had one before. You make it up. And I went,
perfect.
And I saw that sort of, light bulb moment that I'd been given this opportunity, that I'd had this sort of, let's say, it's a sort of bit like an invention on, but here was the gateway for action. Because many people have ideas, but if you don't take action, they languish.
Absolutely. And then bringing everyone together, of course, also generates ideas and also lets people bounce off each other, which is so much more powerful than trying to do anything on your own.
It was amazing. And here's another thing for all the ladies listening. The same time as all the distinguished guests arrived from 52 countries around the world, their ministers of energy, their head of negotiation, it was the Secretary of Commerce from the United States, they all arrived in Denver under this heading of the International Pavilion. The same week, the request for the adoption of a baby came in.
For you?
Yes. Because,
oh my goodness, so what do you do?
So I said yes to everything.
Baby under your arm, said thank you very much. Guess what? I've got a new baby.
Exactly. I was like a kangaroo.
Oh, I bet they loved it, did they?
It made it all the better.
I bet it did.
Hannah is now my eldest daughter. She's 26, and she's got my granddaughter, Jace, who started off the podcast with you the last time.
Right, that's right. Yes, for anyone who listens to the podcast, there's a lovely interruption from Susan's granddaughter.
That's it. Well, her mum was in my pouch when I was greeting all the dignitaries. And, because this was a first time, everybody didn't quite know, but everybody loves a baby. And
you're so right. And 26
connection.
Years ago, though, in a conference that you've organised, and I imagine I can only begin to imagine there were only a couple of women there. What a great thing to do. I just think it's fantastic, inspired of you.
Well, it was by far the best thing. And it's sort of the moral of that story is you actually can do it all. Now, it's great to have help, of course. But you can, if you let go your sort of difficult mindsets and actually flow with the energy of life, which I know we're going to talk about. But that is how it actually turns out to be the best thing ever.
Well, I can just picture you. I can imagine that all those guys must have just been, oh, look at the little baby. Exactly. And it would have loosened everyone up and it would have had a completely different atmosphere by starting it that way. So good on you. Well done.
Well, that was a good one.
And then, to the universe, obviously, for delivering the baby at the right time.
Of course. And I actually know the birth mom very well. And we're all pals. Totally open adoption. So,
that's lovely. I love that. So now now I want to know, I don't know very much about Educo at all, so I'm going to grill you on it. What is it first? What is it?
Well, I'm going to answer that, but I want to go back to my mind.
Sorry.
Just for 1 second. Because after the International Pavilion, professors at universities came and said, could you come and teach how you did that? You had an idea, you gathered together 100 committee, and you executed it, and it's been a success. And I said, I couldn't even understand the question. But
what did I do?
Yeah, well, I didn't know what I did. But in reflection, and at the same time, juxtaposed to that, in fact, the president of Shell, Marlon Downey, kept quoting this old oil man called Wallace Pratt. Oil is found in the mind. And I thought, I don't know what creates the mindset of going for it. And so I made it my business right then and there, 25 years ago, or it was actually about 23 years ago.
And just at that stage, you're still looking at the moment. At that time, you were just kind of, had you spotted Belize by then? Yes, because you'd met Mike.
I'd been to Belize and I'd already fallen in love with the whole country. So that was parallel coming along at the same time as the International Pavilion, and then me deciding I was going to study the mind. I knew all about the earth, not all about it, but being a geologist.
Enough.
Nothing about the mind. It was a glaring gap in actually our education.
I would actually say most people don't know very much about the mind. So
same here.
It's interesting, even with your curious mind, that you had recognized that was an issue.
Well, I don't know if I would have had I not had those major prompts. You know, like a professor saying, "Come and teach it," and I'm going, "I don't know what to teach." You know, so I made it my business for about the next 4 years in a typical scientific and very practical way. Being from Belfast, very, very practical. And I was looking for a course because I'm quite fast action. I wanted a pretty short course on understanding the mind, and I wanted it to have great results. I wanted to see the results being practical, and I wanted the people involved to be walking the talk. So that was critical. And I looked, I wondered whether I would find the answer in India, because they had looked at the sort of
understandably
the spiritual aspects, or maybe California. And I was surprised. And I'm going to answer your question now, because after all my research, it came down to a gentleman, a Dr. Tony Quinn, who'd originally been from Ireland like myself. And
my goodness, that's great coincidence.
He had totally dedicated his life in a way, a capacity that was all consuming to the understanding of the mind and filling in this educational gap, or what would I say? It's because it's even bigger than that, providing this understanding, which is an educational gap still, to the people who come to his course, actually.
And you'd heard that there were a whole lot of success stories, so you knew there were people who were kind of changing the world and using the power of their mind at that stage.
Yeah, you know, it was actually more practical. There was one of the examples was the power of having an operation without an anesthetic.
Oh my goodness, he does that kind of thing as well.
Well, you see, because in a way, he's done his PhD on this, so he tried all areas. For instance, sports would be a common area where the mind is very much accepted. If you pick up a book about golf, it's nearly golf the mind game.
It's true. And they also say with sport that it's, you know, and you hear it a lot, particularly in sport. It's all in your mind, whether you're going to be able to break through that barrier or not, you know, get through the pain, all that kind of thing. They always go, it's in your mind. So, but I've never really thought that's never really applied to business.
Isn't it almost speechless? It makes me speechless.
Yeah, it does now you mention it.
Applied, actually, because it's the same mind.
And it's the same kind of challenges that people are trying to achieve.
Exactly.
And they're going to have to push through their fears and push through all those kind of barriers that we all put up ourselves.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So keep going. Go on. Tell me this story. I'm loving it.
You're now talking about those barriers. They're limiting mindsets. So why does somebody like a Gandhi go for it to get the British, you know, out of India and India become independent? George Price did the same in Belize. It was like a sort of a Gandhi move. He had a clear vision and he stuck to it. But no one had been able to replicate it. No one had been able to teach the understanding that took them to their greatness. They had they'd
done it by themselves. I guess people just thought they were incredibly unique people that had lots of leadership skills that they just naturally had.
Yes. Now, Jules, you've hit it. This is innate in everybody. I can know that for sure, because the whole of B&E and hundreds of people in Belize have already gone and have actually tied in to that, let's just say, genius capacity, whatever you want to say. It's our innate God-given potential to dare to dream big.
Yeah, it sounds. So, what do you mean that a whole lot of the people in Belize have done it? Did you put them through the course?
Well, we put the B&E people, and then the word spread around to the chief of police, to the people involved in the prisons, to the young entrepreneurs all over the country. And they wanted to know, how did we do it? What's the secret sauce?
I know, I want to know too.
Well,
so
that's the key.
Yeah, so tell me. So what? So take me back now. What is an Educo course? What does it consist of?
It is the study.
Without giving away secrets, obviously.
No. The bottom line is, it is not a secret. It's been a secret too long, and now is the very much time to open it up and allow everybody to discover their own birthright. But it's actually a simple, straightforward, but very powerful course on understanding, firstly, the components of the mind, the conscious and the unconscious. And that's quite important to get a vision of that, because, and probably the best one is an iceberg. If you can visualize an iceberg with a little bit, it's got about 5% of it above the ocean and 95% below the ocean. Well,
and that's what is happening with our minds, is it? We're only using just such a small proportion.
We're only using our conscious mind. And our unconscious, as you may know, is actually being influenced, imprinted all the time. Freud was onto this, but not in a broad spectrum way, but very much the understanding of the separation of the mind. Now, and
the power of the unconscious mind, I think. I mean, he was a pretty weird guy in a whole lot of ways.
That's it.
But he definitely made that normal. I think we all understand that, that there are things that happen that we're not sort of necessarily aware of.
Yes, but actually, the more you become aware of it, you see. For instance, I'll just tell you a quick story. I was giving a talk at a university here in Denver, and a young man came up. It was the story about, let's just call it the modern miracle of Belize with finding the oil. And he could hear and see I had followed my passion, and I'd gone to the Educo seminar, and I'd understood about that alignment with the passion and energy. And he came up at the end, and he had nearly tears in his eyes. And he said his grandfather was a famous merchant banker, like investment banker, and his father was. And he shook when he said that he was in the track to become one, and he didn't know how to get out of it.
Right.
You see, he was, even though that sounds like a really nice sort of thing to many people, and they were probably very wealthy, it wasn't his passion. It wasn't.
And he was feeling all this pressure from everyone to do it.
Exactly. And what had happened was that my energy and light had ignited his and made him not want to give up on it anymore.
So is that one of the things Educo does? It helps you unleash your energy to help other people.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And by the way, when your big goal is about other people, it's extra rocket fuel. There are many occasions where people have as a goal, maybe they want a lovely house and a Rolls Royce, and by golly, they get it. But what we're really talking about, especially now when the earth, the planet, and ourselves need this so much. When you include others, you literally are propelled out of bed in the morning. I mean, it's like...
Absolutely. Yep, I have that feeling myself.
Yes, well, you would know, because you're about this dissemination of the understanding. And that's what drew us together, I'm sure. Because
yes, thank you to the universe.
Yes, exactly. Same here. Thank you. And so when I found this course, as I said, it was PhD acclaimed. The people walked the talk, and I could see the results. I went along. I knew nobody. This was 2002 January, and when I was on the plane, I sort of had a bit of a moment realizing this was even bigger than the question of the mind. And I got there, and it was so much bigger, because it was the understanding of our own mechanism, but also of the universe, of life's journey, of why we're on the planet. So it was like not just a realization moment, but an action-packed how would I even explain?
Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you, just from not being able to explain it, and also the way you've talked about it with
Yes.
me over time,
Yeah.
that it obviously is absolutely extraordinary, and maybe there isn't a word that describes it other than amazing.
Yeah, and that comes close. Magnificent is maybe even closer, but the thing about it is that it literally opens you to your own energy. But so it's not stuffing in the way education quite often is, which
It's
actually,
pulling it out of you.
It's actually uncovering it, drawing it out, exactly. And the word educo, E-D-U-C-O, is actually originally from the Latin word to educate. And to educate in Latin is actually to draw out that innate potential and resource. So that's it's in alignment with the ancient vocabulary of education. And it was spectacular in every way.
So now, because you've done it and you've actually applied what you've learned or what's been uncovered in you, can you tell me, when you walked out and over the next few years, how did that play out in your own life, in your own business?
I could see the vision so clearly of not just oil, but I could see the people of Belize rejoicing before we'd even brought the rig in. I saw it done.
Amazing.
And I also saw Belize and B&E as a beacon for others to be able to follow their dreams. First, it all starts with yourself. You've got to look in to understand, as Socrates said, know thyself. And I really mean know to that deepest level. And then you can take action, as you said. Mike and I and a group of us actually formed Belize Natural Energy. Now, the natural is actually referring to the energy within. That's
sneaky.
Yes, that is. That is the energy of all energies, the renewable of all renewables.
It is. So what was your big vision having come out of that when you struck oil, which is just, I love that story anyway, but when you struck oil, how did it make you want to disseminate that and help the people in Belize? Because you've said, and I've heard that it's really sort of benefited the whole country, but how specifically have you done that?
Two answers there. One is actually not just my vision, the universe's desire and vision is for us all to be in total alignment and oneness with each other, with ourselves, and with the planet, in harmony. And so that actually, in that first book, when I went to the seminar, I drew a picture of the earth with the shining light and everybody holding hands. And so that's the goal of all goals. Now, coming out and knowing that Belize was right there and waiting, but as life would have it again, a farmer was drilling a water well in Belize, and he hit oil, and he phoned Mike, and he said, "What is this black stuff?" And Mike phoned
I don't want this. I want water.
Exactly. Oops. I'm getting too excited here.
Oh, no, I'm excited too.
Well, his name's Peter, actually, in Belize. And interestingly enough, he was from Zimbabwe originally. But that oil prompted Mike and I. We'd both done the seminar, and we thought, wow, that's the nudge from the big boss. Come on.
All right. Yeah.
And so we went in and we licensed the 500,000 acres. The Minister of Energy said he gave it to us because he didn't think we had a chance. Because everybody.
Oh, really? So you didn't even have to pay. He was like, it's useless, have it.
I think we paid something. We paid rent or,
Peppercorn.
We did, but it was, nobody believed us except George Price, the statesman of the whole country. And he had a special connection, actually, I think, with God. And he could see the light shining out of Mike and I in the sort of togetherness of this vision. But Jules, Mike suddenly got very ill and died.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That's such a tragedy.
It was, but I think funnily enough, to explain these steps allows people to realize this is even more than just drilling an oil well. Because we were more determined, and I named the well after him, the Mike Usher #1. And we set off and started to drill. And on the 24th of June, 2005, on the very first well, against all odds, we hit the first oil in Belize and the best oil in the world.
That's just so extraordinary.
Gravity. I mean, so light, it still goes into the generators without refining.
That's amazing.
Talk about God's gift. No.
So Mike was obviously watching you anyway, and he was just putting all his energy into the business and into the building of BNE.
Well, we really knew that when we understood the date, because he had passed exactly on that date 1 year before. So on the 1 year anniversary, he died.
I'm getting trickles up my neck now. That's
same here.
Yeah, he definitely had something to do with it then.
And he's still with us. He's probably rooting for us right now across the world. But
he's going, Susan, tell everyone about Educo. Come on, tell everyone how it can unleash their mind. So what did you do? So you had this oil well. You've got this big vision. How did it all play out?
Well, we literally had the discovery. Now, before that, remember I said nobody would invest? We went back to Ireland. Mike and myself and a group of us went back to Ireland, and 76 little Irish investors who had never heard of Belize. So you're not alone in Australia. And they thought a wild cat was a jaguar, a wild pussy cat, basically.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that too.
Yeah. Anyway, they came with us, and all of them had done the same Educo seminar. But so the one thing we had in common was they understood the power of our mind, and they understood that Mike and I had gone to the seminar, and this had come from the vision. Now, you get the vision so clear. As I said, you see it done. And then when you're explaining the vision, you can explain it with such precision, vision,
and clarity. Yeah,
exactly.
You're totally right. Yeah, you know exactly. There's nothing anyone can throw at you that you're not going to know the answer, because you're so clear on how it's all going to work.
That's exactly right. And they all came in basically as the key investors in BNE, and we hit. So it was just like everybody's birthdays coming together.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall that day. Well, the excitement.
Even the government, the Senate, all came up in a bus and celebrated. It was just absolutely brilliant. And it's actually been brilliant all along. But there's another moment, and I think you were asking me about pivotal points, because remember, our vision had been to discover the first oil, for the people of Belize to be positively transformed